Hey guys, Eric here. Chris is on a special assignment breaking into a tanker as we speak. Joey, welcome to the lab.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
I promise I won't tell anyone.
Excellent, excellent. This location cannot be divulged. Breaking Bad, always known for tense situations. They might have outdone themselves this week.
I think so. The train sequence at the end of this episode is just fantastic.
Yeah.
And pulse pounding, if ever there was one.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, yeah, I think the season premiere having the whole magnet truck thing was the first big one this season, but this one outdid that in a big way. Yeah. The whole thing, watching this play out and how every little thing was going wrong and just wondering, you're waiting for something terrible to happen, Yeah. Once you had Todd, that's Jesse Plemons' character, say, "Oh, you've thought of the perfect plan,"
Yeah, it's like, it's not gonna work out the way they expect it to, because that's typically how things happen in this show. But what's so great about it is that you never know what element is going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And even with you mentioned the magnet sequence from the first episode, I feel like this season is just really just like amping everything up.
Yeah. And I mean, this episode, even at the end, but then of course I did think maybe they will get away with it. Once both Jesse didn't get run over and Todd got off the train, I thought something was going to happen when he gets stuck up on the train or hurt himself jumping off the train, but he didn't. It's like, oh, they got off. But then, that ending and this poor kid, which I thought about. I'm like, wow, I should have thought about what that opening scene was, but the show does such a good job of distracting you. So much is going on. I didn't think about that kid.
Yeah, I mean, right at the beginning when they showed the kid and you hear the train in the background, it's like, it goes into the credits and you kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
But then as soon as they mentioned the train, I was like, okay. So
see.
That's where that ties into the rest of this episode.
Right.
But what I really loved about the train sequence, other than, obviously the heist is thrilling, but it's another interesting thing for Walt. When he's just like totally disregarding Mike, and just keeping them on the train to the last very second.
Yeah.
It's just like he doesn't care.
No, I mean, and and he always wants to have the last word,
Yeah.
I mean, even going back, in this episode, of course, it was interesting because Walt, again, being more and more of a bastard. I mean, Walt was the only one gung-ho about the plan that involved killing two people.
Yeah.
Mike, has his own morality, and he did not want to kill two innocent people to do this. And Jesse, of course, doesn't want to kill anyone.
Yeah.
But Mike was like, Walt was like, yeah, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah. Which, one of the things I'm excited for next episode is to see Mike's reaction to what Todd did.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about, it's interesting that Mike wasn't standing there with them, because if he was, you wonder how that would have played out.
Yeah.
You feel like he wouldn't have killed that kid, but what would he have done? But of course we're going to see that reaction next week.
Yeah.
Now, what did you think? I mean, this was an episode that did have a lot of sort of leaps, to get to this exciting scenario. What did you think of sort of the setup to this episode?
I mean, it's weird because we've never seen them do something on that scale before, and all of a sudden they're master thieves in a way.
Right.
They're like they mentioned in the episode, Jesse James. So that was kind of a leap for me, but I felt like the intensity of the situation sort of like, just like when you're in a situation like that and your adrenaline's pumping, it's sort of that same kind of thing where you can do things you never thought you could do. Yeah,
I mean, you had to take a little bit of, a jump to even get to the fact that Lydia was not behind, that tracking device, and that it was sort of a stupid law enforcement mistake. But that it all sort of played out in such an interesting way. I definitely forgave that aspect of it.
Yeah, that was weird because, especially on this show where they usually cover their tracks.
Yeah.
Especially from the law enforcement side, like they're pretty good. And, Hank's investigations and everything are all pretty solid. So it was weird to see that, like, oh yeah, it was just a flub.
Right.
That was kind of awkward. But you mentioned Lydia, and I think the only scene that struck me as really kind of that dragged down the episode was when she's sort of like explaining the whole train thing to them. The exposition is just like flowing out of her mouth like crazy.
Right.
That scene was really dragged it down for me. But I don't know how you felt.
I guess maybe it didn't bother me. Maybe I just decided that Lydia has always fantasized about robbing a train, and so she's decided to put all this in her head. But actually, I wanted to mention that Lydia is becoming more and more of an interesting character to me, and I actually think Laura Fraser, I hope I'm saying her last name right, really cool performance. I mean, it's kind of mannered in a very believable way. You get the idea that this woman is very awkward in this situation, but she also can be sort of tough. She was making demands at a time when you would not think she'd be making demands.
Right. I think you guys mentioned on the last episode of the show that she's sort of like where Walt was, back at the very start of the series. She's sort of a green person entering this criminal world, and she's inspired by the movies and things like that, and she wants to be a part of this world, but I don't think she really knows how.
Right. And lastly, I think it's very interesting that her bringing up to Walt why she wanted to have Mike killed, you could definitely see the wheels turning in Walt's mind, because that resentment he has about that, the fact they're paying off Gus's old crew, he hates that so much. And that brought that up, and I get this feeling we're aiming towards Walt ultimately thinking Lydia is a more viable partner than Mike is.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Walt have shifting priorities constantly, you know. And this episode was great for that, with the train sequence that we mentioned, that scene with Lydia, and also in the beginning, you know, when he bugs Hank's office.
Yeah.
You know, just his acting ability is pretty stellar, I will say.
His stellar acting abilities as he's being a terrible, terrible person and manipulating people who love him.
He's okay with it.
He's totally okay with it. Let us know what you think. How do you think this is all going to pan out next week once Mike runs over, we assume, and sees what happened? And we'll be back to talk about more Breaking Bad next time. Thanks.